All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to get into it.
Good stuff. This time, we're going head first into this rugby match. Toulouse versus La Rochelle that's got everyone talking.
Yeah, this one's got it all.
We've got articles, we've got fan reactions, even some cryptic Instagram posts to try and decode.
It gets pretty interesting, that's for sure.
So maybe for those not super deep in the rugby world, can you give us the quick rundown of this match?
Sure. So at a glance, you had this young, very promising Toulouse team going up against, La Rochelle, the reigning champs of European rugby.
So already a clash of titans, sort of.
Yeah, you could definitely say that, but it's not the final score that's really got everyone buzzing. It's a couple of incidents that happened, well, let's say off the scoreboard.
Off the scoreboard, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Right off the bat, there was this tackle by La Rochelle's Rito Wardy on Toulouse's Valentin Delpy.
And this was, what, early in the game?
Yeah, pretty early on. It was deemed legal, but even that caused some debate.
Like even a legal tackle was controversial.
I think it kind of foreshadowed the bigger controversy to come, almost like set the tone.
Okay, so then what happened? What was the main event?
So then you have Tolu Latu, La Rochelle's hooker, makes this, well, let's just say controversial clear-out on Toulouse's young flanker, Simon Duroc.
So for those of us, myself included, who don't know all the rugby lingo, what exactly is a clear-out?
So basically, a clear-out is when a player tries to move an opponent away from the ball to, allow their team to gain possession.
Okay, makes sense. And this one was particularly rough, it sounds like.
It was intense. Articles are describing it as a side entry impact.
Really?
Meaning Latu kind of came in from the side, hitting Duroc's upper body and leg, and it's suspected he dislocated his shoulder.
Oh, wow. So not just like a little bump. This is a serious hit.
Yeah, and that side entry is important here. If you think about it, if you're bracing for impact from the front, and then suddenly you're hit from the side, it's so much harder to protect yourself.
Yeah, we're not expecting it.
The force just goes straight to those vulnerable areas, like the shoulder.
Ouch, yeah. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that.
Right. And it's worth mentioning that Latu has kind of a reputation for questionable plays in the past. This isn't his first time being under scrutiny for aggressive tactics.
Really? So there's already a bit of baggage there, maybe.
You could say that. It definitely makes you wonder, was this just an unfortunate accident in the heat of the moment, or is this a pattern of reckless play?
Right, right. So what happened next? Did the refs, did they step in?
So the ref gave Latu a yellow card, which basically means...
Basically a 10-minute timeout. But that's when things really blew up.
Yeah.
Fans, commentators, even players, everyone was saying it should have been a red card.
A straight-up ejection from the game. Exactly. The yellow card kind of... It poured gasoline on the fire, let's say. It made it seem like maybe the officials didn't think the play was as dangerous as so many others did.
Right, right. And it got so heated that even Antoine Dupont, the French national team captain and Toulouse's star player, even he chimed in on Instagram, didn't he?
Yeah, he posted something along the lines of proud of the talent and courage of the youngsters.
So far, so good.
On the other hand, the protection of the physical integrity of the players.
Now that's interesting. Almost like a coded message to the refs.
It's very interesting that Dupont chose to use his platform that way. He could have just focused on praising his team, but he very deliberately brought up this safety issue.
So it's not just about one match for him. It's about something bigger.
Exactly. It's about the culture of the sport. It speaks volumes, I think, about the level of concern among the players themselves.
And Dupont wasn't the only one, was he? We got some pretty strong opinions from former French international players, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Richard Dorth, he didn't mince words. He called the officiating shameful. Straight up.
Wow. Pulling no punches.
And he brought up a past incident where another French player, Gregory Aldrit, was on the receiving end of a really dangerous tackle.
So this isn't an isolated incident in his mind.
Not at all. It points to this feeling that despite all the controversy, despite all the discussions, not enough is being done to protect players.
All right, right. And what was Aldrit's response back then?
It was chilling. He said, "Don't talk about player safety anymore." Just gave up.
Wow, you can just feel the frustration in that, their concerns aren't being taken seriously.
It makes you think, what must it be like putting your body on the line every match, knowing that one bad tackle could be it for your career?
Yeah, that's That's got to weigh on you. And Dorth was especially upset in this case because Dorth, the player who got hit, he's only 19.
Yeah, still developing physically.
And Dorth really drove that point home. He said he's also a 19-year-old who isn't muscularly formed yet.
So he's highlighting that Latu went after a young player, someone not as physically mature.
Latu takes out his shoulder right on his knee.
And Dourthe was furious.
The kid comes out with a broken shoulder. Honestly, there are 3 or 4 referees. For me, it's a red card.
He sees this as a blatant disregard for player well-being, a total failure of the officials to protect the players.
And it's not just about the injury itself either, is it?
Right. Monique Mayans, another former French international, she condemned the play itself,
Yeah.
Regardless of the outcome. She said, without even mentioning the youth or the opponent, this gesture has no place on a rugby field.
So even if Dorth hadn't been seriously hurt, she still thinks the play was wrong.
Exactly. She said, Latu is completely on the side, on the shoulder. He does use his arms. For me, it is ultra dangerous.
So she's saying the technique itself is inherently risky.
Right. It puts the targeted player in a vulnerable position no matter what.
So we've got Dupont sending out cryptic messages, former players outraged, all this playing out in front of a global audience. What was the reaction online?
Oh, social media went crazy. Type 5 Rugby, their big voice in the rugby community, they called Latu an actual danger. They pointed out his history of penalties, his red cards, that he has one of the worst card records of all time.
Wow, that's not good company to be in.
They even said, seems to never learn.
Harsh, but you can kind of see where they're coming from.
And fans on X were just as fired up. You had comments like, outrageous clear out, red card all day, cannot fathom how the ref only gave a yellow.
So a lot of people felt the punishment didn't fit the crime, basically.
Yeah, and another fan called it a reckless and unnecessary hit. So again, this feeling that Latu went way too far.
Okay, so there are a lot of layers to this. Was the play even legal? Was the yellow card the right call? But I think the biggest question is, how do you balance this really raw physical nature of rugby with, the need to keep players safe?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not just a rugby question. We're seeing this same debate in all kinds of contact sports these days.
Right, it's a tough one.
Yeah. This is where things get really interesting. Yeah, it really is. Like, where do you draw the line?
Because rugby's always had this reputation, right, for being tough.
Oh, yeah. It's a sport where, you leave it all out on the field. You give it everything you got.
But as we learn more about, like, concussions and long-term injuries, the conversation about safety has to change too, doesn't it?
It has to evolve, yeah. And that's what's so interesting about this deep dive, I think. It's not just about one controversial play, right? It's about this bigger question.
How do you keep the physicality that makes rugby so exciting to watch?
Right.
But also protect the players from these really serious, like, career-ending injuries?
It's a debate that's been going on for, forever, probably, and there aren't any easy answers.
No, I bet not.
You've got those who say, rugby's always been a contact sport. Injuries are just, part of the game.
Deal with it, basically.
Pretty much. They worry that if you change the rules too much, you'll sanitize it.
Take away what makes it rugby.
Yeah, exactly. But then you've got others who are saying, hold on, player safety has got to be the top priority. They say the rules have got to change to protect the players.
And they have a point, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know more now than we used to about the risks.
Exactly. And they're not saying get rid of the physicality altogether. They're saying let's find ways to make it safer without losing the heart of the sport.
So the question is, how do you actually do that? What are the concrete steps?
Well, one idea is to really crack down on enforcing the rules that are already in place. Like in this match, a yellow card was deemed sufficient.
For something a lot of people saw as a red card offense.
Exactly. So maybe if there was a more consistent, stricter approach to penalties, players would think twice.
Like raising the stakes, basically.
Yeah, if players know that certain moves are going to result in, serious consequences,
They'll be less likely to risk it.
Exactly. And beyond just enforcing the rules, maybe it's time to look at the rule book itself,
Like, are there certain techniques or types of tackles that are just inherently dangerous?
Right, like the side entry that Latu used.
Just ban that specific move.
Maybe. Anything that, that targets vulnerable areas, anything that increases the risk of head and neck injuries, those need to be, seriously looked at. And it's not just about protecting players during the match.
Right, there's the long-term impact too.
The long-term consequences of concussions, repetitive head trauma, those can be devastating.
So it sounds like this goes beyond just rule changes, though. It's almost like there needs to be a culture shift within the sport itself.
Absolutely. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. We have to start educating players from a young age, teaching them about, safe tackling techniques, about respecting their opponent's well-being.
It can't just be an afterthought.
It can't be. It has to be part of the, the fabric of the sport.
And that education has to include coaches and officials too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Coaches have a huge influence on their players, right?
Right.
They need to be on board with this whole, safety first mentality. And officials, they have to be empowered to make the tough calls.
Even if it means calling a penalty against a star player.
Exactly. Even if it's unpopular.
So someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, this is interesting, but I'm not a rugby expert. Why should I care?
This isn't just about rugby, though, right? This is a bigger conversation about safety in all contact sports.
Football, hockey, you name it.
We're all grappling with these same questions. How do we protect athletes without, fundamentally changing the sports?
It's a tough conversation, but it's one we can't ignore.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's about the human cost. We're talking about real people.
People with families and lives outside of sport.
And they deserve to be protected.
And as fans, we have a role to play too, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a big hit, but we need to be more mindful.
We need to shift the culture away from glorifying violence.
And start rewarding those players and teams that, that prioritize safety and sportsmanship.
Celebrate the skill, the athleticism, not just the brute force.
Exactly. And that's what makes this conversation so challenging, but also so important.
It feels like we're, I don't know, at a crossroads, maybe in rugby, but maybe even like in sports in general.
I think so. We can't just keep ignoring this player safety issue. It's come to a head.
And we as fans, we're part of it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we get caught up in the moment cheering for the big hits.
That's easy too, yeah.
But then you got to think about the human cost. These guys are putting their bodies on the line.
We have to hold players and teams accountable, I think. When they're being reckless.
Like cheering for a dangerous play, that's not helping.
No, it's sending the wrong message. We need to make it clear that safety matters just as much as winning.
Maybe we need to start, I don't know, celebrating the players who play safe as much as we celebrate the big hitters.
That's a great point. We need a culture shift, I think, where playing smart, playing safe, that's just as important as, as playing tough.
So where does all this leave us? What's the takeaway for our listeners here?
Well, I don't think there's a simple answer. It's a complex issue, a lot of passionate opinions on, on all sides.
Right.
But we have to keep talking about it. That's the key thing. We can't let it, just fade away.
Because if we want rugby, or maybe other sports too, to have a future,
right,
we have to figure this out. How to keep the physicality, the things that make it so exciting to watch, but also keep the players safe.
Here's something to think about.
Yeah.
As we wrap things up here. What if instead of asking how much physicality we're willing to give up for the sake of safety, what if we flipped it around?
Okay.
And asked how can we make these sports, more exciting, more skillful, more athletic without the need for these big dangerous hits?
That's a really good question. Like maybe the pursuit of safety could actually lead to a more, I don't know, a more inspiring spectacle.
Maybe.
Well, it's definitely something to think about as we head into a new year, a new chapter for rugby.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next